of DefCamp 2017, but definitely not the last. We're looking at discussing cybersecurity in the real business world, and I think that April's presentation really set the context for that. So we're going to continue to dive into the topic. We have more than a handful of specialists whose job is to keep businesses safe and at the same time keep them lean enough so they can evolve and grow quite fast. So I'd like to invite on stage Cristian Octavian Goiceanu, Executive Director at the Business Security and Continuity Management Department at BCR, Adriana Radu, Partner at Schoner Attorneys at Law, Gabriel Mihai Tănase, Cyber and IT Advisory Director at KPMG Romania, Gerald Dinka, Unica IT Security Officer, Gernot Golach, the Austrian Federal Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution and the Fight Against Terrorism. And our moderator today will be Gerd Bommer, the head of the commercial section of the Austrian Embassy in Bucharest. Gentlemen and lady, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. We're here today to talk about the business channel. We heard that DefCamp is mainly technical. We're talking basically about technical stuff, hacking, what happens in this world, and cyber security, IT security. And me coming from a business background, and you all coming from a business background, we actually are confronted with the challenges of today. And the challenges of today are cyber attacks, where a cyber attack in general costs you in between 80,000 and 500,000 euros. So that's the average amount that you have to spend for a cyber attack, in terms of damages that you have afterwards, or what you have to do in orders of remedies. How does it get better? So it's a topic that comes up with everyone, and it's a topic that is widespread. Why is it widespread? Everybody here in the room knows about WannaCry. WannaCry hit 150 countries in this world, and we talk about 195 countries that are all over the world. 150 countries have been hit by WannaCry. So it's a topic that touches all of us, and a topic that changes also legislation, national level, the European Union level. And we have looked into the facts a bit in the background. Talking about the facts, in Austria, 3/4 of all the companies in Austria have been victims of cyber attacks in the year 2016 alone. So within 1 year, 3 out of 4 companies have been victims of cyber attacks. We see in Romania that about 40% of the cyberspace was attacked last year. So also there, an enormous number. It's a problem that every company has, more or less. If you have not been attacked, it's not a question of if you're going to be attacked, it's just a question of when are you going to be attacked. The CERT always gives out trends. In Romania, we talk about positive trends in cybersecurity, but it's going to intensify. We're going to have loads more problems. We say that our KPMG, and we have Gabriel Tănase here with KPMG, thanks very much for being with us. KPMG says that the companies simply know too little about cyber threat intelligence, which means the prevention of cyber attacks. KPMG also says that 2/3 of all the CEOs in Austria still see cybersecurity as a technical issue. It's exactly what we have been talking here in DefCamp. This is the 8th edition of DefCamp. The first 7 editions were mainly focusing on technical issues. So that's also the idea that Austrian CEOs have. Nowadays, this is not a correct view anymore, a correct perception of it, but it's completely different. In Romania, more than half of companies do not have an attention on cybersecurity as a major issue in the management level. So that's the basic facts. We will talk about the company's view on company's perspective on cybersecurity, and we will talk a bit about the European solutions. But opening up, I would like to start with Mr. Goiceanu. Would be interesting, you also got a microphone behind you. Would be interesting to hear your view on whether you think that companies, and it includes your own company, but as a general question, are companies ready for the challenges? Are companies prepared for cyber attacks nowadays?
I will start it very romantic, I would say, in this way. So in security, you cannot be really ready in nowadays. So as I also actually had how it was also presented yesterday, in security is not a matter if, it's just a matter when. So from this point of view, to say that you are ready, it's something that it might be today, but definitely not tomorrow. So ready, what should I say? In financials, maybe we are a little bit more fortunate because we are strictly regulated and we see security as a must. Because basically what we are doing, we are selling security to our customers. And also from this point of view, we are opening to our customers via different type of business models, mobile, internet banking, the regular or the old type of branch are more or less disappearing from today's world. So therefore, we move towards a business which includes security by default. So we are somehow, financially speaking, much more closer to GDPR because we saw security by default from the beginning. So we need to see it by default because otherwise we cannot survive.
So banks are in finance industry. Finance industry is especially exposed to cyber threats. If we come to Unica Insurance, or let's say BCR is a subsidiary of an Austrian company. Actually, it's Erste Bank, a subsidiary of Erste Bank. Unica is also a subsidiary. So if we talk about Unica, do you feel fully prepared? Do you think that your company is completely prepared for what's coming up here?
If I'm allowed to start with a joke, if you ask this question to my CFO, which is in charge of the budget, we'll definitely say that we are more than prepared because security means a lot of budget. From my perspective, we are ready, and if we are not ready at the moment, we will never be ever, due to the fact that we paid a lot of attention in this area in the last 1 year, as I said. And what means actually security? Security means, in my opinion, a very good combination between security tools, security knowledge and skills from people, and a little bit of luck. If you have this combination perfectly in one single, let's say, portion, I rather prefer to say that we are prepared for that. But obviously, as Christian already said something, we are in front of our customer. We sell products to our customer, and so on. We are presenting some kind of services. But together with this product or this service, we are selling also some security part in that particular product. And it's not so clear. It's not so clear for the moment if it's enough security in that particular product. And we only have to sit and think in the future what can be done in order to remain in the safe side as we have to be for our customers.
Since when does an insurance company like yours focus on cyber security? When did IT security really become a management topic?
I have to be honest with you, I think that there are 2 years ago when this idea with IT security within the IT department starts in Unica, and with a little help from the local legislation, this idea came up and became a very good project. IT security is well defined now and is part of every let's say business process for the moment.
Yeah. So you talked about the legislative background. Maybe we can turn the opening round to Adriana Rader from Schönherr Law Office. Is also a subsidiary, so to say, of an Austrian law office, Schönherr. The legal basis, so to say, do you think it is already prepared, or is the legal basis only coming up in the near future?
I think part of it is prepared because it's there. We have this GDPR regulation that it has been adopted. It's a matter of time to come into force. But then there's a lot of other legislation that is currently under debate, and we don't know when it will be enforced. Probably, we hope that it will be earlier rather than sooner, so that companies have time to prepare. But there's still a lot to come in terms of legislation.
Yeah. If we talk about the companies again, the preparedness of companies, are they ready for it? If we talk to Gabriel Tanassi from KPMG, Gabriel, you have a broad view on it. You are more or less building up the IT security advisory of KPMG Romania, and you have a lot of clients, different clients from different sectors, industries. How do you see the preparedness of the companies for the topic of IT security nowadays?
So, if we speak about management implication in IT security, I think in Romania there is a lot of improvement. There was a study recently done just looking over the annual reports published on listed companies all around the world, and in Romania only 2% had any kind of mentioning cybersecurity or security projects they are doing in their companies, in the annual reports. Even if they have financial type of reports, that is a very good opportunity to speak about this and to demonstrate that you have a maturity in this area and you do something about it. But in Romania, only 2% had this. So this in terms of management involvement. In terms of technical aspect of security, we saw that there are different levels of maturity across the industries and the companies. Clearly, financial industry is the most mature, and this is probably coming from what my colleagues here already mentioned, regulation, and then the type of business they are doing. But also there are other industries which are starting to gain on this area, and one of these is even traditional retail, for example. Okay, we speak about online, and that is a must to include security. But even on traditional, we see improvements. Of course, this is mainly related to big companies. When we go to the middle and small companies, and if they are not technology type of companies where they include security in their daily business, things are not going too well.
Gabriel, what do you think, what actually sparks the interest into IT security? Is it the attacks that the companies and the management thinks about the attacks? Is it actually an advisory package that you build up where you say, for the companies, we can do this and that, we can bring those services, and you talk to your clients that you more or less have from your tax and management consulting advisory? Or is it something else that sparks the interest into IT security?
I think the best spark for Romania in the last period was the regulatory part. Because many companies started to focus on security starting from the first regulatory requirements, and they, let's say that in Romania, au prins gustul, had the taste, yes, because they did few projects, they saw that things are not going necessarily too well, and starting to do more and more complex things, even if they were not required to. So probably the spark was a regulatory one. For other sparks, were coming from group levels for companies which are part of group, where maturity from group level also was pushed to local companies. So actually, it's a mix. It's a mix.
So what would you say is more or less companies have to be forced into doing something about IT security? Gernot Golub from the Austrian Ministry of Interior. I guess I'll have to introduce you a bit and why you're here with us on the panel. You're with the Cybersecurity Center in Austria. It's part of the Austrian Ministry of Interior. So you are more or less responsible for cybersecurity, IT security on a national level, and you cooperate with companies. Would you confirm what Gabriel said, that companies have to be more or less forced into the topic?
Definitely. I'm coming from a state office, so we will never get a clear yes or no from my side. It's always it depends. I think it very much depends on what kind of attacks are we talking about. Is it classic cybercrime? Is it nation-state adversaries? Are companies ready to cope with that? And it depends, and I'm following up on my speaker on the panel here, and it really depends on the industry sector. Stuff some industry sectors are doing is like Star Trek science fiction for other industry sectors. So it really depends on what are you looking at, so it's very hard to answer the question.
When you talk about the sectors, can I just interrupt you for a moment? Do you talk about sectors that are more exposed, more prone to attacks?
No, I think there are, when we talk about critical infrastructure sectors, finance, energy, transport, water, and so on, they are all exposed to those kind of attacks. So there is not anymore this, it's only the finance industry, which gets hit. I think all sectors are prone to attacks, and I will not tell you now which sectors are very good and are very bad unless you switch off the cameras. I might get some problems back home.
You might spread some ideas in here.
No, I think a lot of the people sitting here can think about those, but there's a big difference at which industry sector you're looking at, and also in combination on which kind of attacks you're looking at. So it's very hard to answer the question if companies are ready for that or if they're not ready for that. But I think when it comes to forcing companies to do something, we will, I think, for sure talk about legislation, which is coming up next year. My point of view, or our point of view, is that it's far more better to cooperate than to force. In the end, this might be necessary to force specific companies to do something, but the best thing would be to cooperate and to raise security for the industry, for the state itself, that way.
Yeah. If we say we force the companies into doing something about IT security, what is the current status of IT security? If we look into banking, for instance, what are the threats that are coming up for you? What are the threats that you draw the most attention from an IT security point of view?
Okay, coming back to finance, because whatever we do, we are coming back to finance, and whoever attacks banks first, because it's much easier to give the reward. I would say that most probably, as compared to other industry sectors, finance have a broad view and also a complex view in IT security. And also from this perspective, yes, I would say yes. We as an industry, we have a focus on IT security and on IT security measures to prevent the actual threats. And speaking from my own perspective, from DCR perspective, last year we had a lot of DDoS attacks, a lot. We just increased it exponentially. We raised it up to, if I remember correctly, 53, which is basically starting 2 years ago with almost 0 in 2 years' time. 53 above 10x, it's much. And also this year, the star of the floor is the malware. So we have a lot of new malwares stopped by our systems, and we see that one of the entrance vectors is the email. So a lot of threats are coming via emails, via the entry points of each and every institution.
Yeah. If we talk to Gabriel, because you got the advisory from KPMG in the topic of IT security, what would you say? What are the threats that are right now the ones that the companies work the most with, they're the most prone to? What is it right now in terms of current IT security landscape?
Yes, malware is clearly the star of last period, but also there were quite a few important events in terms of data exfiltration and data exposure. And recently, Yahoo announced that actually pretty much every account was compromised, and not a limited number like they mentioned in the past. Equifax compromising a large number of probably half of the population of US, putting all the information in public and the internet. So malware and then also this public personal data. So, and I think that this personal data will somehow be on a growth area, because with GDPR coming, people will try more and more to see what is happening there and try to see what can be done and what can be performed in this area.
All right, if we talk about the attacks that are happening right now, where do the attacks come from? Gernot Golok, you're on the state level. I don't know if the companies analyze where attacks actually come from, but we talk about two levels. We talk about the layer of geography, which countries are the ones that where the most attacks come from. And the second one is a really interesting discussion. So who does actually do the attacks? Is it the states? Is it secret services? Is it rather script kiddies that just buy the software online or the codes online? Who is it actually? Your competition, maybe?
So attribution, the whole topic with attribution is always very hard, because everyone, if an attack occurs, everyone wants to see a map and a red pinpoint on that. So that would be like the best thing to do for a lot of people to have, but that's very hard. And you see that also in the media, very often attribution is done way too fast. So if you hear, I don't know, some denial of service attack on some company in Austria, for example, and 5 minutes later you read that it's from Russia, for example. That's way too fast for the complexity of those kind of attacks, and also attackers try to give false flags, for example. If you look, for example, at the compile time of malware today, a lot of those were compiled at the Russian standard time. That doesn't mean that they're all from Russia, for example. So that's really hard to attribute on a geographic kind of level. Very often you can connect this with some kind of announcements on social media or with other information, then you might be able to pinpoint something on a map. But to be honest, that doesn't help too much a lot of times, because what do you do then? Yeah? Then you have a red pin in North Korea, and what are you doing then afterwards? So that's maybe not the main question. What companies should be aware of is the ways and the kind of attacks such adversaries, if we talk about nation state or cyber terrorism, what are they doing, what are their capabilities, and am I a possible attack? If I'm an Austrian company and I'm producing machines or whatever in China, for example, there's the potential to be a possible target for industrial espionage, for example, and I should cope with that problem some kind of way.
Yeah. Christian, if we talk about a bank, how much reaction time do you actually have when an attack comes up? Do you get a pre-warning from CRE or from someone else, or do you have an IT department that gives you a pre-warning that you see attack is coming up? How many minutes would you have to react on something like this?
Okay, I wouldn't say really minutes. We have some intelligence services and we are quite okay with them, so we are appreciating all of these kind of preventive actions because they are really helping us, and it's helping in the way that we manage to close some of the entry points from the beginning, so we just minimize the possible entry points. In the rest, we are relying on systems that we have, and in terms of timing, it really, not minutes, but I would say that not more than half an hour to deeply react. So to know that it's happening something and to move forward.
We had a very interesting discussion yesterday with Gernot Kohlhoek about how does an attack come up, when do you hear about it, when do you see about it. You prepared a few slides for us. Maybe we could get the slides on the screens, and you can give us an idea of how in Austria we had certain attacks. You chose certain attacks. How in Austria did it actually happen? In terms of the time frame that you have for reaction time for them.
So I have one example from Austria here, also to show you, coming mainly, I'm sure, from companies, what state authorities here, as an example, in Austria can do for you. It's just a timeline. It was 3 attack waves in Austria, which came up last year in September, and it were performed by the ANT group. That's a kind of a Turkish patriotic hacker group, or however you want to call them. And the initial problem was that the British Airways flight had an emergency landing in Schwechat at the Viennese airport, and there were Turkish citizens on this airplane, and there were problems with the entry into Austria. No big problems, there were just some administrative problems. And this group said, yeah, this is bad behavior against Turkish citizens, and started DDoSing the website of the Vienna airport. No rocket science hacks, but very powerful DDoS as a service, in fact. They started DDoSing this website. The same they did for the Austrian National Bank. There was a press talk with Turkey as a topic in these press talks. They didn't like something which was said in those press talks, and they immediately started attacking the website of the Austrian National Bank. The same we had with a candidate of the Austrian presidential election, and so forth. We saw those attacks and we cooperated with these types of critical infrastructure ministries and analyzed it on a technical level and wrote a DDoS warning also with IOCs and so on for all the other critical infrastructures which might be attacked by this group. Then it was silent sometime, and in November they did it again. So it was the Austrian Ministry for Foreign Affairs, the Austrian Defense Ministry, and several other incidents I'm not allowed to talk about, they are not disclosed. So the information you see there is public information, it was in the media too. Yes. What was our reaction on that? We could see those attacks coming, To be honest, it was not a very long period before the attacks happened, but a short time before the attacks happened, we could warn those ministries, those critical infrastructure companies, and when the attacks started, we immediately could inform the operators, watch out, the attacks are coming with these technical details, with these IOCs, with these characteristics, and so forth. Then there was a third wave coming up, and here, I'm not telling you the story why, it's always the same story, something came out of Turkey, and they started attacking the Austrian Parliament website, again, the website of the Foreign Ministry, and so forth. And what we could accomplish here is that we could see those explicit threats on the internet, on public and channels, and we could warn those critical infrastructures, those ministries, way before the attacks happened. So they knew in a certain time frame attacks will be happening with this technical information, and so we could reduce damage and downtime drastically with this example. Just to show you what we are doing on a state level to help critical infrastructures, to help companies, to help other ministries to cope or to prepare on explicit threats and attacks. Maybe just one side note, what the state authorities can never do is be your SOC, be your Security Operations Center. It's not our duty, and to be honest, we also don't have 300 cyber cops sitting somewhere and the personnel to do it. So imagine it like if someone breaks into your apartment and you call the police will for sure not clean up your apartment, put in an alarm system for future attacks and whatnot. They will try to find the bad guy and try to take this information to cope with future robberies or future kind of attacks.
All right, so we see that by working on it, you actually get the chance to pre-warn the infrastructure providers, but also the companies. So we can do something beforehand. This is always based on the assumption that we have certain business processes which are the same, business processes in e-banking or whatever it is, a way to communicate with the customer, a way of information that is out there, and a way of where the data is in the background. But what happens if you actually, Gerald, if you look into changing business processes, you're redesigning business processes right now. What happens if you do that, and can you give us an example of a business process that you would change?
Yes, I'm here to share with you my experience from the insurance industry. So as long as this industry remains for a long period somehow in the shadow of the banking system, they have now to reveal their true face, and they have to show to the customers that policy insurance is not only a paper. Actually, it's a paper until you have a problem, you have an issue, and you have to be in front of the insurance officer and said, hello, I have a claim here, and I need support from you. So from this perspective, the whole process of claims design was a huge challenge for our company. So we have to somehow differentiate the customers, because obviously there are some very good customers which have very good behavior and they have to receive a very good offer in this respect. And we have customers which are not paying so much attention to their goods. So we have to, let's say, have a kind of profile of them and make some customized offer. In order to have to be prepared to offer customized products, we have to have somehow an entire infrastructure behind, which calculates and which providing us enough information, accurate information, in order to take some right decisions. If you are talking about Internet of Things, different sensors which are present on the cars, and if you are talking about smart homes, which are able to provide also enough information, we have to somehow deal with this huge amount of information, and to extract from this amount of information only the information which is reliable to us. So from starting from this perspective of redesigning this, let's say, claims process, we arrived also in front of an IT security challenge, We have also GDPR as a huge challenge this year and the next year. And we have somehow to redesign also the process from this perspective, including in this process some IT security requirements, which will be hopefully so useful for us in order to not take the wrong decision based on good data. So once again, we will have to remodulate our business process, but keep in mind that the information is a lot of information in our hands and should be somehow very well treated, stored, processed, and let's take good decisions based on that information.
So if you have the information out there, the way that the information is being either put into your system or is given out of your system is being changed as well with the customer, for instance, using his own device, his own mobile phone, his own iPad or whatever, to input data. This opens up new issues. When you design such a process, is the focus of the IT engineer, is the focus on more or less the application itself, on the programming of everything, or do they have a clear focus on IT security when they start up to develop such an application?
Actually, we are starting from it's a very well known word here, customer centricity. We are thinking about customer centricity only from the data perspective. Customer for me is amount of data. It's confidential data, and I have to be I have to pay a lot of attention in dealing with this data. Or from this perspective, I have to give a right input when we design process in order to have proper leverages to deal with this data safely. This is my goal. We have a lot of data. Definitely, all this data is not processed in my infrastructure. I have cloud services, which is also a huge challenge. So my goal is to keep this data safe, and I have to take good decision based on this data.
So if we talk about data and keeping data safe, I couldn't think about any other sector but banking where it's more important to protect the data. When you design an e-banking system, when you think about it, what the process is going to be like, what is in the front end, what is the focus on IT security there? Is it a major issue or is it just something that comes with it when one designs the applications?
Actually, it's a major issue from the beginning, and we are involved from the beginning in all the developments that are taking place at one time related to whatever system we are implementing, either it's internet banking, mobile banking, or regular system from the bank. So, regardless if it's how should I say, directly exposed to the client or it's an internal one, we are focusing on the same level of interest from security point of view to all of them, and we are involved from the beginning.
Yep.
It's not perfect, but we are there from the beginning.
Gabriel, as having an advisory package, would you confirm that? Would you say companies come to you and they ask you right away, if you design something, can you test the IT security that we have behind it from the very beginning, or is it only something that happens a bit later in the process?
So we have both situations. We have companies which are coming and involving us in testing the solutions that are developing from the beginning. We had cases where we had to test systems because of the specific requirements from the regulation, and they were surprised about the results. And just to give an example, in one test in insurance testing, we could obtain access to pretty much all type of information, including health information, because that company was selling also life insurance, and we could see the results of medical tests and even some diagnosis. So pretty scary. Just to know a simple example that someone has an allergy to some food or something, and imagine what you can do with that information if the guy is not your friend.
So if we talk about the information that is in the background, we talked about insurances, you talked about healthcare services, we talked about banking. Has there been any regulation being enforced already right now, Adriana? Or is the regulation coming up in the future? Or which regulation is coming up to protect the data?
Actually, we have regulation right now because data, if we talk about data protection, there's a European-wide regulation. This is a directive mainly, but this will be replaced, as we all know, starting from next year. So there is regulation right now. In the future, though, we will have a more strict regulation, so the burden of the companies will be higher in terms of compliance efforts, but it's not something completely new. The GDPR incorporates a lot of jurisprudence from the European Court of Justice, a lot of guidelines issued by the data protection authorities. So I think there are very, very few things that are completely new in the GDPR. Most of the things we knew about them, it's just that now they are codified in a regulation and they are stricter from certain perspectives, and of course there are higher penalties than there are today.
So what is your experience in terms of companies that talk to you about GDPR, about the regulation that is going to come into force next year in May? What is your experience? Are companies still hesitant to talk to you about it, or do they talk to the lawyer in the very first beginning already when it comes up the topic?
I think they start with the lawyers, because for most of our clients this is a process driven from a legal and compliance perspective, of course with the necessary IT support, but they start from the regulation. And then they develop and they look at the IT part and see how they can incorporate it in this compliance effort, which for some of our clients is really huge.
Yeah. So you actually have a data privacy or data protection officer that you have to install based on GDPR. What is the status right now in the companies, in the bank, in BCR for instance, Christian? Do you already have a data protection officer? Do you have a data privacy officer?
We do have a data protection officer for starting this year basically, and it's deeply involved. He basically is deeply involved in implementation of GDPR regulation until May next year, and also will be directly involved in all of the requirements that are coming with regulations as a law. Basically.
So it's getting more or less a central function in risk management.
In our case, it's a central function in risk management. It will be part of the second line of defense of the bank. We have three lines of defense models inside the bank, and it will be part of the second line of defense. It will be part of risk, and should be there.
Adriana, are the companies more interested in how to implement GDPR, or are the companies more interested into the penalties, because there's quite stiff penalties behind it? Are the companies, so to say, scared, or are they really trying to increase their data protection?
I think it's both. I think on the one side, the level of fine is quite scary for everyone, but it's not only this. I think there are a lot of companies that see this as an opportunity to be in touch with their clients, to offer them more control on their data, more security, and possibly gain a competitive advantage from this perspective. So I think there are both sides of the story involved.
Yeah. Gerald, we talked about it yesterday, about the data protection officer and about the penalties. Do you think the focus should be on the penalties, just to make the companies aware about it?
From my perspective, the fines are the trigger. Unfortunately, it's not normal, because we are talking about a regulation which has in scope the data protection for all European citizens. But the reality says that the fines are the trigger, unfortunately, and based on those fines, we have to do something, and we have to have enough resources to be prepared for the next year. And you asked before if we have a data protection officer. I have to be honest with you, we don't have a data protection officer for the moment, mainly due to the fact that this profile is not so clear for the moment. It seems to be a kind of combination between Superman and kind of Bruce Lee, and we haven't found the proper person for the moment. There are a lot of discussion surrounding future character within our company. Our company is a little bit smaller than the BCR, and I think that a good position for a DPO is within the compliance, probably. And we are firstly focusing on, let's say, the gap analysis and to see exactly where we are today. And after that, hopefully we'll take proper decision in order to have a good compliance check at the end.
So companies should actually try with implementing GDPR, implementing a data privacy officer. They should focus on how not to be a target, or should they focus on, what remedies do you do afterwards, Sabiana?
I think from legal perspective, when we look at GDPR and provisions regarding IT security, I think we should look at two things. First of all, how to ensure security of data, so how to prevent data loss and data theft. And then, if we end up in a situation of a breach, then how to respond in a timely manner so that the damage is reduced as much as possible. So I think these are the two main things that are relevant from an IT security perspective to these two parts.
Gerald, what is your opinion about that? Can you get your company ready for something like the looming threat of a penalty?
As I told you before, there are some kind of pillars which also afraid us. There are some particular areas within the company which are dealing with a lot of personal information. There are sales, there are HR, there are marketing. But there are some rumors also that they are preparing a lot of things waiting for the next year in order to catch some kind of incidents and came in front of a company, hopefully not Mica, and say, I have an incident. I saw a procedure which is not so good in your company, and this is the price. I'm not such a big fan of this scenario. I think that this kind of, let's say, approach will not be encouraged by our supervising agency, I say like this, because obviously these kind of complaints will go directly to the agency. Hopefully the agency will not be, I hope so, will not be so, let's say, willing to perform some checks, at least for the next year. And I'm quite sure that the huge advantage of the GDPR is improving continuously your processes and improving your awareness within the company and improvement the security of your data. If you've already done something like this, and also data protection officer, this kind of Superman, probably you will be on the safe side for a longer time, probably.
Adriana?
I just want to add something about the point that you made with people that may be willing to go to companies in May and say, look, you did this and that to me, and then I get you to court. I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of companies that are currently really not prepared for this, and they need to do something. And I will give you an example from a few days ago. I wanted to pay a bill, and the provider, when I entered my account, the provider said, "Look, we renewed our data privacy policy. Are you fine with this policy or not?" And I didn't see it, and I said no. And then another window opened and said, "Look, something like, we are good people. We will treat your data professionally. Are you really not okay?" And then I said no. And I opened the data privacy policy, and there were all sorts of things there. But what struck me was that in the end there was a provision which says the client declares that she read the document, she negotiated it, and she is fine with the content. My God, I didn't negotiate anything.
That's a common thing when you get the licensing agreements. You always get 100 pages. You should read it, and you can't say no anyway.
Yeah, and this kind of practices expose companies to this kind of things.
So we've been talking about GDPR, When we talk about GDPR, is this the one regulation that you have to respect, or is there any other regulations coming up, or where do you think should be the focus of the companies as well?
Thank you very much. I'm first of all one side note to GDPR from my perspective, and I don't want to get into a data protection discussion here because then we could talk until the end of the week. But one example from an Austrian company, you know the whole topic of profiling, for example. So when you follow the GDPR, it's not allowed that your data is profiled in your profile as a person without your consent. So they prepared for that, and they put into their contracts in very clear terms. I read them, and on their website, the opt-in button. And the interesting thing is, I'm sure if I send out or give every one of you the contract, 90% at least would say I'm not opting into this profiling. But in reality, 70 to 80% of all customers opt into this. So the issue is with data protection and agencies and companies, it's a little bit like a parental, it would be like a parental fight. The agencies finding the companies and the companies trying to implement the stuff. But don't forget that it's the public perception of data protection and privacy which is important, because if the public just doesn't care about data privacy and data protection, this will be some kind of it's my private opinion now, a storm in the water glass. I don't know if it's an English term, or do we just say this in Austria? It will be for 1-2 years, there will be fines, and then this will go. But different regulations coming out, it's some kind of the ugly, unnoticed child of the GDPR, because it doesn't have those big numbers. But that's the NIS directive, which is also to be implemented in the European Union next year. And if you look at that one, for example, it's only targeted on critical infrastructures. So you can say now, okay, there's 150, 200, I don't know how many companies, let's say in Austria or Romania, maybe. But if you think about that, the state has now the right to be some kind of a watchdog for critical infrastructure companies. That means that they have to notify the state authorities when certain things happen, and the state authorities can order them to implement security measures, have the duty to audit them each year. So you're being audited by a state authority or by some company who is accredited, maybe by the state authority, and giving and proposing or demanding security measures, minimum security standards, and those critical infrastructures, and we're talking about the big companies of all those nation states, they will push this down the supply chain. So what will happen is that there will be a high level of security being demanded by the big companies, and I'm pretty sure that over the next 1, 2, 3 years we will see those security standards be pushed down. So I think there will be a lot of pressure on the companies. Now this is it's not my private opinion, it's also my private opinion, but it's also a good kind of pressure because it is important. If you look, I'm sure it's coming up in WannaCry, hospitals not functioning anymore, you're in an emergency room and nothing is working anymore, so I think the pressure is good. But I think there will be a lot of pressure coming out of the NIS directive to companies in the economy, in my opinion. Maybe a little bit more than from GDPR even. That's my private opinion.
Yeah. We talked a lot now about the laws, we talked about the regulations, we talked a lot about what the companies have to do, how the companies can get prepared. But Adriana, what do you think, how well prepared actually the state authorities right now for GDPR coming up, for the NIS directive? What's the state with the national authorities?
I think if we look at the Data Protection Authority, I think there are, because the law that rules their organization and functioning is currently under debate. What I've seen from there is that they are trying to have more staff. So probably by mid next year they will have more staff, and I think they will be prepared to investigate and to issue, I don't know if large fines from the very beginning, but they will probably be ready to do this. And if we look at the history, I've seen that in the annual report for 2016, the number of investigations doubled, and so the number of fines. So it seems that like they already started.
Yeah. So do you think that they're stuffing up? Do you think they're gonna have the competency?
Well, probably not from the very beginning, but it will grow, and at some point they will have, because there will be a real interest in the subject. And of course, unfortunately, on the market, as my colleague said, it's not easy to find really competent staff with exposure and experience on data protection matters. But as soon as the subject will become will become more interesting and there will be a lot of practice, I think staff will also become more prepared for this.
Yeah. In the banking sector, we've been talking with the CEOs of the banks here, and two of the top 5 banks in Romania are Austrian banks, owned by Austrian mother companies. We have always been talking about a banking fee that should be introduced. Do you think that the GDPR and the fines behind it could be some kind of banking fee where the authorities just say, you know, the state budget is a bit stressed, so we might have to raise some money, and this is one of the options to raise the money? Are you afraid of that?
My personal opinion is that shouldn't be seen like this. So, no, banking tax, it's banking tax. It might be introduced whatever GDPR is doing, or whatever revenues will be basically obtained via GDPR. So, in my opinion, there are two different things. But what I would like to say is that each and every company will do the best, or hopefully will do the best to implement this regulation in a reasonable way. And what's maybe more important is that there is no clear checklist about things that we have to do in order to be compliant with GDPR. So a lot of terms from the regulations are debatable, are not very, or could be interpreted in different ways, and therefore it will be challenging to discuss and to argue and to be able to say I'm fully compliant or I'm compliant with, because at the end of the day it will be just authority which will come and say, okay, I will see it completely different. And from this perspective, most probably will not be the fine that will come, because what's more important is to have a sound program related to GDPR, is to have good people and good knowledge about GDPR, to be implementing GDPR in the best way possible, or reasonable way possible, and therefore to took all the reasonable measures to protect those information in a proper way.
Yeah. Gabriel, you had a pretty strong reaction on me asking whether, you know, competition council, for instance, is there to keep up competition or to raise money. Might the National Authority for Data Protection, might it be raising money for the state?
That's a difficult question to answer. Let's say we hope we do not have such situations. What I would also like to add about GDPR, now it's a lot of debate on legal and IT, and probably this year and then next year, much more further than May, it will be the discussion. But I think this is also important to look on a long term, because on a legal perspective, the discussion will end up probably next year, in the second part of the year. People and companies will figure out what is their position in terms of interpreting different legal aspects. But what remains on a long term is the security part, because in nowadays businesses are going more and more digital. So I think that the legal part will be most important at the beginning, but on long term, for data protection, we will go to the security. So it's very important to start with both legal and security from the beginning and trying to mix them as good as possible.
So we've been talking about, you know, the legal situation in Romania. We've been talking about the authorities in Romania. Gernot Goloch, being from Austria, being from state authority, how well prepared are the state authorities in Austria for the topics coming up?
Very well prepared. I have to say no. No, this is an ongoing topic, in fact, because what you need is personnel. You need it if it's GDPR, if it's a NIS directive, and so on. And what's a really big issue, and I'm sure a lot of people in here also know this, and I'm sure a lot of recruiters running around out there trying to get specialists in the field of IT, information, cybersecurity, because the simple problem is that there are too little expertise in terms of human resources for the economy. I'm sure KPMG knows this very well, and I'm pretty sure also insurance and banks know this very well, because you need a lot of personnel and they're just simply not out there in the numbers you need them, and you have the same problem at state level. But what we are trying to do is to build this up slowly and steadily, to build up own expertise in this field, to recruit also from the outside, and trying to get ready and cope with the upcoming duties of our authorities. And one side note, what's also very important in this case is if we see this whole legislative state authority company thing which is coming up, no matter what legislation it will be, as the state orders and fines a company to do something and they are fighting against each other, then as a whole society we will lose. I'm pretty sure this will happen. I think what is necessary, and this in Austria this seems to work pretty well, is that there's a cooperation, that we are on one team. You know, that the state authorities, critical infrastructures company, and so on are one team, cooperating, fighting together against threats. If this starts to which was your question before, if this starts to become a situation where the state, the bad state fights against the companies to get some money out of them and so on, then on a society, on a nation, on a European level, we will definitely lose. So cooperation is one of the most important things when it comes to all those challenges ahead, also those legislative challenges.
Yeah. So just to round up,
do you want one example? Because it just popped into mind. For example, if a big company, I'm saying in terms of a NIS audit, which will happen, let's say in 2 years, and says they want to DDoS the state authorities, then they will just send them a truck full of paper. That's the easiest way. So if there's no cooperation, they can just try to play this battle, and then this will not work out.
Yeah. So just to round up the topic of legislation and everything behind Adriana, maybe I can ask you one thing. Is the fines that are going to come up the fines for the companies per se, so for the management, or is there any kind of personal liability involved for the software engineers, for instance, saying that the software engineers did a mistake, they should have looked at, as we do have the technical staff here with us today, the software engineers. Is there a personal liability in it?
No, I think for them that coming directly from the GDPR now, but there could be a liability coming from the contract, from the licensing terms, when the company acquired a sort of, IT license for an application related to security. For sure, they will be very interested to build up a liability mechanism there. So not directly GDPR, but contractually, yes.
Yeah. All right, just to sum up the topic of legal implications, we also wanted to open up the questions to the audience. So if there are questions, please raise your hand, make yourself visible to myself. We look against the light, so maybe we can have a microphone. Where is we'll have a microphone back there. Maybe we can have a microphone up front here. And if you would just please also introduce yourself for the question.
Okay, hello, I'm Stefan Leitner from Urban Adria University in Klagenfurt. So one thing I'm more or less missing here is about the thing about education, more or less, because the personnel is missing. So why don't start at the education level? So is there also some plans in this direction? Because, for example, the people who are deciding is management. And if we look at about economy study, they don't get it there, that there is a security risk or threats out there.
Yeah. If I may pick that up, first of all, thanks very much for being here. It's the university I studied at. But I maybe hand over the question to Gernot Goluch. How much does the state more or less facilitate education, bring it into the education right away?
Thanks for the question. It's a good point. It really was missed because that's the point where we should start. When I was studying at the Technical University of Vienna, in the master thesis part of my studies, there was this new curriculum called IT security. What we see today is that more and more. Now I don't know what's Fachhochschule in English. I don't know. So let's say
University of Applied Sciences.
Yes, University of Applied Sciences. Universities are putting up education programs for IT information security, and that more and more people come out of that. Here I'm totally with you. I think that there's the more the better. That's definitely for sure, because even what we see, what is coming out of the institutions, of the education institutions, is still too little, in fact, for the industry and for the state authorities. Definitely.
As we do have in Romania an extremely well development, let's say, in terms of number of software engineers in the industry of IT. Gabriel, maybe I may pass on the question to you, because what is the state here in terms of so many software engineers are being educated, so many software engineers graduate every year? Does the state do anything about it? Do the universities do something about it?
So traditionally, yes, software engineers were the main graduates, but in the last years things changed a little bit, and especially on master classes, cybersecurity and information security became an important topic. And what is good, and I know this because also colleagues of mine are teaching there. They try to move from that theory part, which was done in the past quite a lot, and bringing people from industry to teach on those classes. So in master classes in polytechnics, in Facultatea de Automatică, in Military Academy, people from industry are teaching courses and doing hands-on exercises in the labs. So things started to move a little bit from theory to more practical studies. But it's not enough yet. So, and it's not enough, especially in terms of numbers. Yes, because these type of studies are quite limited, and the number of graduates probably is not enough in this. Not probably, for sure, is not enough at this moment on the market.
I'm going to come back to you in a moment, but we had another question over here, so if you could have a microphone come over here. If you pose the question, please would you introduce yourself as well?
Hello, I'm Cristian. I'm a senior integration engineer. And because I heard what happened with the Astra Asigurări, Astra Insurance, with the database that was corrupted, I want to know if you are scared somehow that your own databases can be corrupted by tiny virus.
I will take that answer, and because I know there was a lot of buzz in the market with this situation. What happened at Astra? It was an interesting situation. I can at this moment provide some limited information because there is an investigation in course. But that was a targeted attack. The sample of malware was not affecting any other company. And I will just give you, I will confirm what was in the media. 3 Bitcoin ransomware asked for a workstation and 5 Bitcoin for one server, and that was the server with the smallest type of, or the most amount of data into it. What do you think? It's an ransomware asked to be paid, or just something that directly it's targeted not to be paid, but just to destroy the data? So the good news is, and it's not necessarily public information, but I can say that the good news is that data is not lost. Apart the effort to build the C drive of the operating system, everything else will be and is already part recovered in terms of more than 95%. So those who targeted failed. And I can say that it was this was because of a combination of luck, very quick response we had on that situation, because we have been there in terms of 1-2 hours and to minimize the damage. And of course, when I say luck, it was about one point. So it was a targeted attack. It started at about 10 a.m. in the morning. Probably the attacker wanted to start at 10 p.m., but he missed up the time. So because if it would have started at 10 p.m., probably by end of the weekend, things will look much worse. But at this moment, things will recover there. It's a difficult situation because Astra has no resources in the situation it is to improve too much. But data will be recovered and is recovered as I speak, and the infrastructure there will be redesigned to isolate it a little bit more because there is no need to be online too much.
Gernot Golok, did we have in Austria any cases where a complete database was stolen from a company, and what happens in terms of state actions when this happens?
You just need to Google the news. So there were a lot of, a couple of years ago, for example, I don't know if you have this in Romania, but in Austria we are obliged to pay something for state television. It's called the GIS. So every Austrian person needs to pay some money so that the state television is existing, and they, for example, lost via the most simplest SQL injection attack, the one you see, this N always one equals one, the whole customer database, for example. Yes, you see those cases. A lot of them are disclosed. In fact, if you, for example, are a company and you want to file a case and you want to bring it to prosecution, you can also let this prosecution be classified. So it's no. So I can talk about a lot of cases in that fact. But yes, there have been cases. It would be unrealistic to say no here. What can the state authorities do? As said before, we are not a security operations center, so what we can do, we can prosecute, we can use this information to prevent future attacks, to inform other companies in this field, for example, of potential attacks, and try to find the bad guy, which is very hard when it comes to cybersecurity, to be honest.
Yeah. Adriana, when we talk about an attack, do you have the experience that companies, when they're being attacked, are turning to you as a lawyer immediately, trying to check back what could be the implications?
Yes, of course. They look at IT security and legal department and lawyers. I think there are two sides where they look. And I think in future this subject will be even more interesting because we have this 72 hours deadline to report data security breach to the Data Protection Authority, and this may be a challenge, especially, for example, if an attack happens on Friday evening, Friday afternoon, and then no one is in the office over the weekend. It's difficult. This is something that should be prepared. Of course, there's a discussion whether you do the notification and then you complete the notification with additional information as soon as you find them. I think this would be possible, but still, it will be quite an effort, a legal effort and an IT effort.
Yeah. I mean, what was very interesting was what Gernot Golok said. We had yesterday a discussion, more or less a conference about cybersecurity, IT security in businesses. And there was also the talk about the image and the reputation of the companies. And when we built up the conference and we talked to all the speakers, every company told us a case, but said, we don't want the case in the conference, we don't want to talk about it. So having the privacy like you do in Austria is really, really more or less a confidential court case. It's a really important thing. Adriana, will you have confidential court cases here in Romania as well for businesses so they can keep up their reputation, their image, they don't fear about the damage?
No. I don't think we have. As a regular thing, we don't have it. Of course, it depends on when you look at this, what type of litigation it is. So it's a bit technical if it's civil or if it's criminal litigation. But as a matter of principle, no. So it will be out of the problem.
I mean,
maybe one side note. Yes, the state, for example in Austria, can say it is classified. But as we see all the time when you open the news websites, a lot of those cases even don't come to public. And I think what's a very important thing is how you handle this public incidents you had, if they are gone public. Two examples, when you look at the Equifax with this horror breach, but how they handled it afterwards and how it came out, and this was disastrous. When you look at, there was one small incident, LastPass, this password manager software you can use in your browser they had also a security leak, and they immediately start tweeting, okay, we're going to fix this, we see it, we confirm this, and so on. So there was like this active discussion with the public, and there was no, how do I say it, there was no shitstorm going on to LastPass in comparison to what happened to Equifax or a lot of other companies. So how, yeah.
We got another question coming up here, if we can have the microphone in front.
My name is George Ivan, I'm working in private sector as a software engineer. Has been discussed a lot about what the business can do for improving security, and from the state part, more or less in terms of regulation and legislation. As far as I can see, at least my belief, security can be with IT in front or not, meaning is very similar with normal security, and for this the state has some systems in place. For example, it's a health system that is able to respond in case of emergencies, to quarantine. It's a military system, an army for approaching external governments, security issues, as well systems for internal security, police, internal affairs, and so on. In IT, it seems that mostly relies on what particular businesses can do or particular sectors. I wonder if you see a need or a movement for IT security that at state level they start to have this kind of systems like firefighters and so on in place.
Definitely, I think there will be for sure some change in this. We will see the next years. It's already there. If you look at Finland, for example, or Denmark, I think the Netherlands, too, Spain also have this. Those are the four countries I know right now by heart. They have some kind of a sensor network, so they have some kind of mechanisms in place where they protect critical infrastructure. So in fact, you can Google this. This is like open information. It's called Havaro in Finland, for example. So they have the sectoral certs, they have the national certs, they have the state authorities, and they get the information, for example, if critical infrastructure is attacked, they put in their IOCs, their classified IOCs at some point in time. So there are already initiatives. As usual, from the far north in Europe, they tend to be the first movers in such cases, but I'm sure at least a discussion about such mechanisms will definitely come to all European states, or all states in fact. Non-European states, they might already do it at some point of time. The problem here is very often the public discussion about this, and the privacy versus safety discussion. So if the state operates such a mechanism, such a network, there will be for sure people also with good intention saying the state watches the internet traffic of the whole country, and that is bad, and you will have this discussion. So the discussion about this is good, but I think this will be some kind of a more slower process because of this discussion, which is good. But if you look at Northern European countries, and Spain, I think also has this, they already do have such mechanisms in place. A couple of these effects. I think in Denmark even critical infrastructure is forced to participate on such a network. I think so. I'm not quite sure right now, but this is very fresh. But yes, this will be definitely a development in the upcoming future in European countries.
Thank you very much, Kenneth Golo, for the explanations. We have one more question over there.
Hello, my name is Sebastian Pitei. Why do we need regulations? Why everybody complains and, let's say, cringes and say, oh, we need regulations to basically do our job? the correct way? Why can't we build infrastructures from the ground up which are secure and not, let's say, be forced by regulations and fines, penalties, and so on and so forth? Why don't we build them secure for our own businesses in the first place? Because at the end of the day, if you have a security incident, realistically speaking, the fine is not going to be that big. The issue, though, is going to be, loss of credibility towards your customers, loss of actual data, and loss of, let's say, countable money. So my question is to you, gentlemen, why do we need regulations, and why can't we do it right the first time?
Adriana, maybe you want to start up on that. Is it that lawyers have a job?
Well, it will be, I think usually regulation does not come, generally it's not regulation and then activity. I think it's first activity and thereafter regulation. So, and if we look again at the GDPR, because this is the main topic from a regulatory perspective, GDPR I think was necessary mainly because of a lack of trust coming from data subjects as concerns the way their data was used. So, yeah, it's a really interesting question.
Gabriel, maybe I may pass it on to you, and maybe I can put it in a broader context. The question is partially, is there a perfect IT security? You do penetration testing from KPMG. You have some examples of clients of yours in retailing industry, for instance. Is there kind of a perfect IT security they can set up, or is there always an option that something can happen?
So, in terms of perfect IT security, 100% IT security, there is no such thing, and I think that all of us can agree on this. In terms of examples, yes, there are examples starting from a mobile application and then managing to get into the internal network and control more than 100 servers, being in position to do denial of business, for example. Not very easy attack, but anyway, so there are a lot of situations, zero-day vulnerabilities that are every time discovered. So security is a journey, a process. No one-time project will assure security level to anyone. In terms of regulations, why do you need that? I think that one of my colleagues said it's quite true. Probably regulation came after actions happened. So there are somehow consequences of what some people or companies or I don't know what kind of organization or entities did, and their action generated the need to regulate and to limit in special cases their actions.
Let me just move on in the topic a bit. In the run-up to the conference, I had talks with different companies. I had a talk with one company that did penetration testing on themselves, more or less, and they sent out phishing mails to their employees. And they said the result was, let's say a bit disastrous. The quota of employees actually opening up the email and opening up the attachments and everything, and then getting in the end the message, this is your IT security officer, with the name and the mobile phone number. Please feel free to call him. We always talked about employees as one of the biggest vulnerabilities in companies, in kind of management. Talking about BCR as a bank, I mean, you're very exposed always to it. What do you think is the importance of employer or employee awareness? How do you raise it?
In our view, it's a very important part of our awareness program. This is why we invest a lot of efforts and resources in doing this by different channels, I would say. And another point is to be said here is the fact that definitely employees are one of the key points of any organization, and good educated employees are making the difference between what will happen in the real life. And I will add one more point on the table. It's the new concept, which is basically named human resilience. So you could have quite good combination of employees educated and knowledgeable about security, but you also need people with cold blood, with human resilience, with the possibility to act and react quickly in a different situation, in a stressful situation, and that will also make the difference between failing or winning in a different incident.
I would like to add something here. We are speaking about user awareness, but I think that we should not only focus on, and this is coming from some examples we had, not only focus on regular users. We had situations where we did pen testing on web applications or different type of application in a repetitive manner, and many times we found the same type of mistakes, mainly coming from programming. Yes, like filtering user input. And every time we report it, but the next version and the next version had the same type of problems. So sometimes this is also coming from, it's not only about users, it's also about programmers and IT specialists, because sometimes our people are very good IT specialists, programmers, but not necessarily with security in mind. And this is coming especially from education, because usually, as mentioned earlier, the education focus on operational point, on delivering, yes, and then learning about IT and programming, and not necessarily focusing on security. So this is also an important, not only educate normal users, but try to educate also those IT guys which do not have necessarily security in mind when they do configuration of systems, when they develop new systems.
All right, as we're coming to an end, we started a bit late, so we'll use another 5 minutes, I guess. We'll just do a closing of the panel discussion here. And if I may start up with you, Cristian Goiceanu from BCR, what are the recommendations that you would have for other companies in terms of IT security? How should they behave? What should they do? What's the main important point?
I was somebody saying that it should, if not, they should see it as a priority. It should be seen as a business value added to each and every product that they are selling. And that should be the long-term journey in implementing security and security measures, because, as I said before, 100% security doesn't exist. So it's a long-term journey, and they should start working on this journey as soon as possible and do what's reasonable for them to do it, taking into account the level of business, their maturity, and also I should say, the number of clients and exposure that they have.
Cristian Goiceanu, thanks very much for joining us. You have actually a very interesting title in terms of IT security, because you're the Executive Director at Business Security and Continuity Management in BCR. So you already call it business security. IT security is business per se. IT security is also a cost factor in the company. But if I may pass on to Adriana Radu, she's a partner at Untitled law offices. What is your recommendations to companies, to the businesses?
I think there are 2 or 3 words. The first one would be prevent, and then if there's a breach, act quickly.
Thanks very much. We also have Gabriel Tanase here with us. He's the Cyber and IT Advisory Director at KPMG Romania. Thanks very much for joining in. What is your recommendation to businesses?
So, as mentioned, security is a journey. It's a journey that should combine both technical measures and I mean from security systems, security tools, security testing and exercises with security governance. And because one without the other cannot work. And when I say security governance, it's not about having some policies and procedures. We are thinking about resilience. Probably in many business continuity plans, there are scenarios like earthquake, to recover after an earthquake. What about recovering after a security incident? Not so often seen these days. So these are points that we should consider. And as a conclusion, all of this cannot work without management support. So it's critical that this journey starts from board level. So without management support and without appropriate financial support for doing all the security tasks and activities, we cannot make it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gabriel Tanase from KPMG Romania. Gerald Dink, IT security officer at Unica Romania, subsidiary of an Austrian company. You might have both views. What is your recommendation to other insurance companies, to other businesses out there in the market about IT security?
I will take this opportunity also to give my personal answer to the last question. I have no idea if the person who asked is still here, but why we need regulation, why we don't are already perfect without regulation, because that's human being. When we first met our parents, we are free, we have no idea about regulation, we have no idea about constraints, but I think that we were not quite happy because we cried a lot. What we are now, it's a strange combination between our education and legal and constraints, so I rather prefer to think, and it's strange, I have a very strong advice to start from the people, because they are the most important chain in your infrastructure. Don't buy only security tools, don't buy only consulting services, but start from your people, because they are the most important asset in your company. So give them enough training, give them a lot of freedom to express themselves, and let them to express their value within your company.
Gerald Dinka, Unica Romania, thank you very much for being with us here at the panel. And I guess the best wrap-up is actually from a state perspective. What does the state recommend to the businesses? Gernot Golok from the Cybersecurity Center in Austria, Ministry of Interior, your recommendations?
I want to add something. It's just an addition, and maybe it's a nice finish because it's an Austrian saying. In Austria there's a saint, it's Saint Florian, it's the saint for all the firefighters in Austria. And the saying is, I tried to put it in English, is, Dear Saint Florian, spare my house, burn others down. So don't be a low-hanging fruit in the terms of cybersecurity. Don't be the one who is the most easiest to attack, because then you will be hit for sure. Just keep that in mind and try, at least in your peer group, to have some kind of security standard and minimum right now, and we'll see what the future brings.
That's a great recommendation from the Austrian state. Just be better than your peers. Gernot Goloch, Austrian Ministry of Interior, Cybersecurity Center in Austria. Thanks very much for being with us on the panel again. Just wrapping up right before lunchtime. The main messages in our opinion are: be concerned, the threats are real, the attacks are coming up, you're going to be attacked anyway. If you haven't been attacked up to now, you have to be better than your peers, obviously. Do your homework in organizational ways, in technical preparation, awareness, requirements that you have, and stay up to date with your systems and all software and hardware that you have in the background. But I guess what we can start with, or what we can stop the panel with, is in the end the saying: be prepared, don't be scared. It's not a topic to be scared about, but thanks very much for being here, and I hope we gave you some insight into IT security businesses. Thanks very much, enjoy the lunch, enjoy the conference.